Hey, grade eights. Happy Friday. I hope you guys are looking forward to the weekend. You have some fun things that you're planning on doing, or you're just going to enjoy the nice weather. Whatever it is that you choose to do, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Today, we are going to go a little bit further into kind of data management. So we've been talking about scatter plots for the last few days. So I'm not going to go too in depth with the review for the scatter plots, just because everyone's scatter plot is going to look a little bit different depending on which set of data you chose, as well as choosing what the range was for your x and y axes. But I'm just going to kind of go into a little bit review of what that data set would have looked like. So if you had a data set that looked kind of like this and it went in this direction, you know it was a positive correlation. If you had something that kind of went like this, you know it was like a high positive. If you had something that went like this, it was low. And if you had something that goes like really steep, it's like a high negative correlation, or sorry, negative correlation. So I'm not going to go too in depth, like I said, just because I was looking at the different charts and everyone's just looks a little bit different from one another. So I don't think it's really fair for me to go in to say what's right and what's wrong, because again, you could have used a different range for your chart that maybe someone else's didn't. Also depending on whether you used Excel or Google Docs or something like that to create your chart. Sometimes they will have different ranges. Sometimes when you type things into Google spreadsheets, I've noticed even if it's the same set of data, sometimes it'll have a higher or lower range, just depending on when it's used. So that's pretty much it. We're going to just kind of go straight into our lesson for today. So measures of central tendency. You guys remember this from last term. We talked about mean, median, mode, and range, and you have to find the mean, median, mode, and range. What we're doing today is you are actually, instead of having to find the mean, median, mode, and range of like all those kinds of things of one set of data, right now we're looking at, by looking at the data straight up and what that set of data is, choosing the best measure of central tendency that makes sense for that set of data. So you don't have to calculate it. You don't have to use those same numbers 4 times over to calculate mean, median, mode. So mean, if you guys remember, is all the numbers added up and divided by how many there are. So if I have 5 different sets of data, so 5 different numbers, I add up all those 5 numbers and divide it by 5. Median is ordering them from least to greatest and then the middle number. And mode is the one that occurs the most often. So if there's like 5 30s in a set of data, you're probably going to use the 30, and that would be your mode. We're not going to talk too much about range, so we're going to kind of stick with mean, median, mode. How to recognize which one to use. So if you have a set of data, you need to figure out which one would be best, mean, median, mode. That would make sense. Mean is when the data has no extreme values, as in if I have 5 numbers and they're all relatively close to each other, as in like there's no huge jump from one number to the other, I would use that set. I would use mean. So like, let's say I had the numbers 95, 94, 89, 91, and 93. Those numbers are all really close together. There's no huge jump in numbers. So it would make sense to use mean for that set of data. Median is, I would use it if I did have an extreme value in my set of data. So if I have, let's say I have the example of 89, 91, 95, 97, and then 206. I would use median in this instance because I have a really huge jump right here in this set of data where all the others tend to be pretty similar. So if there's really big extreme values, or if there's a huge difference, like let's say instead of 89, this number was like 42, I would use median in this case because there's a huge variation in these values. The other time I would use median is if there's no big gaps in the middle of the data, as in if I have, let's say, 5 numbers again, and if the numbers kind of jump all over the place, like I have 1, I have 93, I have 207, 42, and 26. These are my 5 numbers. There's big gaps in the middle of this data if I order them from least to greatest, because I have 1, 26, 42, 93, and 207. There's huge variations from one number to the next. So in this case, it would be a little bit tricky to use median because there's so many big gaps, or if there is a big gap in the middle of the data. So let's say maybe all the numbers are closer together. So one instance is 26, 28, 43, 62, and 93, or maybe not 93, 71. So as you can see, there's a huge jump in the middle of this data. Or sorry, not that, I should go back. The middle number of this data, there's a little bit of a variation between this number and the other ones. So in this case, median may not be the best case in this set of data. Mode makes the most sense if you have a lot of repeated numbers. So maybe if you only have a set of like 6 numbers and only 2 of them repeat itself, mode may not be the best case because there's only 2 repetitions. Whereas what if I had the repetition of, let's say 9, 7, 7, 1, 7, 2. In this case, mode would make sense to use because I have 3 numbers that repeat themselves. So in this case, yeah, mode would make sense because there's a lot of repeated numbers. All right, so we're going to do a few examples of this kind of measures essential tendency and choosing which one is best. So instead of having to calculate median mode over and over again, I'm just going to choose one that would make sense for this set of data. So let's look at our checklist. All these numbers, are they relatively close together in range? My smallest number is 97, my biggest is 112. That's not a huge jump between them. And the numbers in between kind of are spread out evenly. So right off the bat, it looks like mean would make sense. I don't have any repeated numbers, so I can't use mode. Median, I don't have any extreme values, and there's no big gaps in the middle of the data. So it makes sense to use mean for this set of data. So instead of having to calculate all 3, I know, I can look at this set of numbers. Mean makes the most sense. So I'm going to choose mean, and I'm going to calculate the mean. So mean is adding up all these numbers together and dividing it by 5 because I have 5 numbers. If I add up all these numbers together, I get 523. Now I just take that 523, I divide it by 5, which gives me, a second, I'm just going to punch this into my calculator. It gives me 104.6. Does this number here seem to work well with this set of data? It does, because like I said, 97 is my smallest, 112 is my biggest. 104 is like a nice happy medium in between those between the 2 big sets of data. My other numbers are 101, 103, 110. 104 seems to fit in fairly well with that set of data. All right. Some other examples I'm going to show you on another page. So here is that set of data I just used. It says to use mean because the data has no extreme values or there's no numbers that are repeated. So it means mean would be best. What about if you have a set of data like this? I have 35, 30, 50, 200, 30, 70, and 20. In this case, we have a huge outlier. So when you have a big outlier in a set of data, sometimes you need to leave that outlier out and calculate the numbers as is. So if I take out this big outlier of 200, the rest of the set of data makes more sense to calculate. And in this case, the mean would make the most sense. However, but because I have this big outlier, I have an extreme value. So what would make the most sense in this case is using the median, because now I have this extreme value. All right. So today you're going to have questions that look like this. I'll even show you kind of what they look like. So these are some examples based off of it. But if we're looking at numbers like this, basketball, the number of points scored in a basketball tournament are 37, 47, 50, 44, 47, 38, 42, and 47. Which measure of central tendency would best describe this set of data? So right off the bat, it doesn't look like there's any huge variations, so I know I don't have to use median. The numbers are pretty close together, so right off the bat, my mind is going toward mean. However, look at the numbers that repeat themselves. I have 47, I have 3 47s out of a set of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sets of data. In this case, because I have 3 numbers that repeat itself and only 8 data points, the mode would make the most sense because there's so many repetitions of 47. What about this number right here? Music, the number of songs downloaded is 8, 12, 6, 4, 2, 0, and 10. Which set of data would make the most sense? Which measure of central tendency would make the most sense? Well, do I have any extreme values? Kind of. There is a big variation because I have something as little as 0 and something as high as 12. So there are some more extremes in there. The numbers do increase at a steady rate from 0 to 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12. And I don't have any repeated numbers. So mode is right off the bat. Now I have to decide between median and mean. In this case, because there are decent jumps in between the data, there is a little bit of a bigger extreme between 0 and 10. And based off of the numbers increasing only by 2, it would actually make the most sense to use median, because my lowest number is 0, my highest number is 12. That's a big jump between 0 and 12. And in between those two numbers, the numbers increase by 2 each time. In this case, it would just make sense to order them from least to greatest and choose my median number. Okay. So today what you're going to end up doing is you're going to have a few questions that look pretty much exactly like the ones I just showed you. And you have to choose the number of central tendency that would make the most sense. So I'm going to go over the rules quickly one more time. Mean. There's no extreme values, as in there's not huge jumps between like the lowest number and the highest number. And that there is no huge outlier number. Median. The number has the data has extreme values, as in there's huge jumps in between the sets of data. And there's no big gaps in the middle. So if I order them from least to greatest, and let's say I have an even number, there's 6 numbers, but between, I'll show you an example quickly. I have 6 numbers, 1, 3, 5, 21, 26, and 27. If I was doing median in this case, there's a huge jump in the middle of these two numbers. Because remember, if there's 2 middle numbers, I have to add them together and divide by 2. There's a big jump in between here. So median would be a little bit trickier to use because there's that huge jump. So it would kind of skew the data. So in this case, I would have to use mean, because even though there is a big jump, median doesn't work. All right. Mode I can't use because I don't have any repeating numbers. Okay. And then mode, if there's a lot of repeated numbers. If you have a set of, if there's 10 data points, but there's only 2 repeated numbers, mode may not work the best. But let's say you have 4 or 5 repeated numbers in that set of 10, then mode would make the most sense. Okay? So mean, no extreme values. They tend to go up, they tend to vary very little between the numbers. Median, there's extreme values in there, and there's no big gaps in the middle of the number. And mode, the data has repeated numbers. If you guys need a little bit more clarification, or if you're still having a little bit of trouble with kind of digesting which one would make sense, especially between mean and median, I will include those first couple pages of examples of this set here to help you out, just because it's a nice kind of written out example that shows you and explains, oh, in this case, there's no extreme values of the numbers that are repeated, therefore mean would be the best. I will tell you, if you're very torn between mean and median, and the number kind of work, the sets of numbers kind of work for both, I would go with mean. Mean is usually the best use of central tendency because it is that average of them all added up together and divided evenly. So if you're really torn between mean and median, go with mean. However, if you have a set of data and there's one big extreme, then go with median. All right. So you're only going to have a few questions for this unit, or for this section, sorry, that are pretty much very similar or the same as what's written out here. I'm kind of pulling them from a couple different places, but they all follow the same kind of format. You'll have a Google form available to you this time, as well as doing the regular PDF. So I'm going to upload the PDF that kind of looks like this, just kind of pieced together into a customized PDF worksheet because I'm not including everything that's here. And that is what you're going to have for Friday. And then starting Monday, we're going to be going into our last little bits of things I want to cover from our grade 8 curriculum, and then do a little bit of extension into grade 9 curriculum, so you guys will hopefully feel a little bit more prepared about some grade 9 content. If you guys have actually any particular things that you are worried about in grade 9 or that you want me to kind of go over and talk about, I am more than happy to do so. We can do even a Q&A lesson one day for grade 9 math. If I have a whole bunch of questions that you guys send me over, let me know, because I would love to help you guys out as much as possible, especially since our year was just turned so much shorter than what it was originally going to be. I want you guys to feel as prepared as possible for high school math, to feel like you are somewhat confident going into it. So let me know. I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. If you have any questions, email me, let me know. Like I said, if you guys want to do a one lesson as like a Q&A session, and I just do kind of like a random slurry of a few different questions about different things that you might kind of come face to face with in grade 9, let me know. I'm more than happy to do something like that for you guys. All right. Thank you all. Have a great weekend. And if I don't hear from you, I'll see you guys on Monday.